Robert, thank you for coming in and meeting with me. I really appreciate it. I know that we've been working on academic monitoring to improve student engagement and understanding in the classroom. So how do you think that's been going so far?
Well, since I've adopted academic monitoring, I feel that it has improved my teaching, and not only improving me, but it has taught the students that I have expectations for them.
Absolutely.
And it keeps them accountable for their work.
Yeah, awesome. And has that helped? Have you noticed?
Yes, it has helped my students and me keep on track, but it's helped me see where my teaching needs to be retaught, or where I can move forward with some students, and what skills I need to work on with them.
Awesome. I noticed when visiting your classroom last week that you implemented monitoring pathways and used them several different times during your whole group lesson. Doing this really helped your students to stay on task as well as engage those that had lost focus. Now, remember, those monitoring pathways are a reminder to the classroom for the expectation that you've set, and also for the learning to continue with minimal student distractions as you guide them through the lesson. So really great job doing that. So Robert, now that you've mastered creating and implementing pathways, I want to take a deeper dive into academic monitoring by giving students written feedback. I want you to think about how this can be done and why student feedback is so important. What is the impact and purpose to giving written feedback while you're academically monitoring?
I would say the purpose is to give me, the teacher, an informal assessment as far as where my students are, if those that are not on target or are on target, and it allows me to tailor my reteaching and when I need to review and when I can move forward.
Absolutely. I want you to think about a time, and I love that you say all these things because it's helping me to reflect on the time that we did have a PD on academic monitoring. So I want you to think back on that time where we did have PD over academic monitoring, and tell me, are there some key points that you could name that have helped you?
Yes, I would say the first key point that helped me was creating a successful pathway in the classroom. A successful pathway helps the teacher see all of their students, whether I'm in small group and whole group, and while I'm walking around, it gives me an intentional pathway to see, oh, I need to go see if this group of students or my,
and what you need to work on with certain groups of students. Absolutely. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a video, and I want you to look at that video and just kind of get some things that you want to take away from this video so that we can talk about and discuss. So I'm going to go ahead and share that video with you.
Great work, sweetheart. Rest of purple, can you turn back to number 1 and 2, please? Nice job, Malcolm. I'm getting tricked with the operation. Keep it up. You too, John. How'd you know to use addition?
Because Sister said she forgot to add 34 candy.
So after watching that video, I know there was a lot to take in, and it was some really good stuff, but what is the gap between student learning in your classroom with your academic monitoring and the use of how you use it versus how the model used it in her classroom?
Yes, I would say the difference or the gap between what I do and I saw in the video is she had a very clear expectations, and her students knew those expectations. She had, you could tell it was a routine, and it wasn't done overnight. It was done gradually, and her students were very in sync, I would say.
Absolutely. What are some things that you might notice if you begin to implement some of this real-time student feedback with your students in your classroom?
For one, you would have to start with student expectations. I need to set those expectations, and I noticed that the students are very attentive when you set those expectations. They know the routine, they know that their teacher's coming around, and they better show their strategies in order to diminish misconceptions.
Absolutely, and I love that you say that because it is a routine. It is an expectation that you set, and it is something that you have to do over and over for the students to kind of internalize as well as yourself. So yeah, I agree 100%. So great job. I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate that you looked at the video, you watched it, and you took a lot from it. So based on what we've discussed today, what do you think that your action steps should be for this upcoming week?
I would say my action step would be to implement student feedback.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important to give students that feedback because it almost helps guide them. It gives them an understanding right then and there to kind of show them what's the next step for them and their individual needs. So that's great. If you do implement feedback, what are some key steps that you're going to need to take for this implementation to happen?
I would definitely say I would need to set the expectation for the students, doing it with fidelity and also being very consistent. Students shine when they have consistency and routine.
Absolutely. And I love that you say using it with fidelity and consistency because that is key for student learning and their student environment. When kids have consistency, they're more likely to make growth. When there's fidelity, I mean, if you're using it with fidelity, it's almost going to go from, you know, you've implemented it, you've applied it, but you're going to master it at some point. So great job. So what is the key to closing this gap?
I would say the key to closing this gap would be applying what I'm doing right now in the classroom, which is those pathways, and moving further would be to implement the real-time student feedback.
Absolutely. So Robert, your action step for today is pen in hand to give written feedback to student work. You're going to do this by comparing answers to your exemplars and determining what is it that they need or what they're missing, and give quick feedback by using cues such as a star or a circle. So now that we have determined the best action step to implement, I would like you to put in your own words what your action step for this week is going to be.
Well, I would say my action step would be to use pen in hand by using my cues in order to give student feedback.
Absolutely. Now that you are able to restate the action step to me, I want you to write it down so that you can refer back to it throughout the week. We will revisit this when we have our follow-up meeting so that we can reflect, or you can reflect, and we can talk about how you applied it in the classroom.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Now, Robert, let's brainstorm for a bit and think about when or where we can implement pen in hand. What lesson would be a great opportunity to use this action step to provide students with real-time feedback?
For sure. I would say I would definitely use it in my RLA, either whole group or small group, and I can definitely see myself using it in my math block for sure.
Absolutely. I want to be a little more specific as far as where we can use this strategy, and I think that it would be a great opportunity to use it during your Eureka math block, your math block, to teach skills or concepts. Remember, this is going to help tell you which students are working within that ZPD range, which students are going to need intense intervention, and which ones have mastered the skill and need more rigorous instruction. So it's really a tool for you as well to guide your instruction and your small group. Okay, so Robert, now let's practice. Let's say that you are going to go ahead and begin your Eureka math lesson, and you've introduced the skill and the concept, and you've guided students through it, and now you're ready and you're going to give students an opportunity to apply what they've learned through independent work. While your students are independently working, you're going to use those monitoring pathways that you've become obviously amazing at because you've used them several different times that I've witnessed. And you're going to go around these monitoring paths to check for student understanding. But while you're checking for understanding, you will now be using those cues that we previously discussed as your feedback for students. Do you remember what we discussed those cues were going to be?
Yes, we were going to use the circle for go back and review your answer choice, and star is to remind the students that they're right on track and they can move forward.
Absolutely. But let's just say that you're using your cues and students are not picking up on the circle cue for them to go back and review. At this moment, how would you get students' attentions and correct that?
I would definitely use a CKH strategy, which is the timeout hand signal. And my students know this by this point in the year. The expectation has been set. When I do timeout, that means we need to pause and come back to, and I need to give a redirective. And during this redirective, I would remind them that the circle, if I'm going to put a circle on your paper, maybe you should look at that answer choice again and review what strategies you're doing. And if I put a star, you're right on target, you can move on.
Absolutely. And you're right, it is imperative to make sure and those students know the expectation, but it's most imperative for them to know and for you as a teacher to give that instruction prior to the independent work.
Exactly.
So I would definitely focus on always giving clear and concise directives prior to the independent work and restate those cues. And like I said, if they're still not picking up and say you've done that and you've given them that directive prior to independent work and you possibly have a few students that are not picking up, it is okay, like you said, to go ahead and just to regroup and let them know this is the expectation of our cues, this is what we're doing during independent work so that everybody's on the same pace. Okay. So I know in the past we've talked about these before when we did our academic monitoring with PD. You can refer to these as champion checks. You know, students, are we using these champion checks correctly, or do we know what they are? If I'm going to go around and do a champion check, these are the things I'm looking for. You can also even post them at the front of your classroom or anywhere in the classroom where your students can just refer to them as needed. Say they are not really understanding or they may have forgotten. There it is for them. They
have that go-to.
They have that go-to at all times, exactly. So, great job. I think you're ready, and I'm excited to see you implementing this. So I know we've discussed a lot today, and you've taken away a lot of information, and I've gotten a lot of information from you too as well, so I appreciate that, and I'm excited for your implementation of this action step. So can you tell me when would be a good time for me to go and observe you implementing this action step in your classroom?
Definitely. I would say to come by tomorrow during my math blog.
Awesome.
You'll definitely see some great strategies there.
Awesome. I'm excited. And just know that when I am going to, like when I come by to observe, keep in mind that I'm going to be looking for the use of real-time student feedback by using cues. Okay? So I'm excited. And Robert, thank you for coming in. Thank you for meeting with me. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate the hard work that you've been doing this year. And it's showing.
And thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you.